Sickler today, though. Theo started at VNS in 9th grade and has done numerous artistic things, including designing the cover of the yearbook one year and having his artwork chosen to hang in the AASD boardroom another year, and last summer traveling to MCAD, Minneapolis College of Art and Design, accepted into a pre-college art program for the summer to do incredible things in an incredible place. Now he's going to show us what he's been working on all year long, more incredible things that you will experience with him today. Theo Sickler.
In late elementary and middle school, the majority of my time was spent in the school library. Whether I was just waiting for my parents after school or leaving a class because I got bored, my go-to activity was to find an interesting book and try to read it in one sitting, so I wouldn't have to check it out and get lectured by the librarian again about turning in books on time. I found that the perfect type of reading material for this situation was manga, comics, and graphic novels. They allowed me to read faster and were more immersive to me than written novels. While I had always enjoyed creating artwork, through comics and graphic novels, I found the inspiration and motivation to become serious about working to improve my skills. Because of this, I realized the perfect final project of my Valley New School career would center around comic art, comic books, and graphic novels. I began my research by attempting to actually find the difference between these three terms. Many artists may seem to use them interchangeably, but there actually is a difference between comic art, comic books, and graphic novels. Comic art refers to the entire art of sequential illustrations arranged to tell a story. This can be in the form of a scrolling webcomic, a newspaper comic strip, a social media post, comic books, graphic novels, or many other formats. The term comic book is usually used to describe shorter printed books which represent a small part of an overarching story, whether sequential or anthological. Graphic novels are usually longer printed books that either contain a complete story or a much larger chunk of a continuing story. Because of these differences in story length, I decided to focus my research mainly on graphic novels, which brought me to the question, how does one create a graphic novel? Well, the specific process is different for everyone. It always begins in the same place, with an idea. This idea is then built upon in the concepting phase. This stage usually involves brainstorming and then putting every vague idea together like a puzzle. The story is then finalized through an outline. After the story is planned and outlined, a script is created, which is then turned into basic sketches. Because no two artists are the same, the actual process of finishing the artwork will always be completely unique. It can involve line art, colors, painting, screen tone, or none of these things. You may notice that this process usually involves about the same amount of writing-related steps as art-related ones. Well, this was something I definitely wasn't happy about. Proficient writing skills are a very important requirement for creating a graphic novel. There are infinite ways to write an engaging plot, even as a beginner to writing. With that being said, though, there is a basic plot structure that will work in almost every situation. This plot structure is split into 3 acts. In Act 1, it establishes what the protagonist's everyday life is like and then begins to diverge from that routine. In Act 2, the plot gets more interesting. It is built with rising action and the midpoint, which is the exact middle of the story. The events that happen before the midpoint should raise questions, and the events after it should answer them. Act 3 should begin with the low point. This is the worst possible state the protagonist will be in. It doesn't have to be anything super large scale. It could just be the protagonist failing the test they prepared the whole story for. But it should be something that the protagonist feels they can improve from. The climax, which directly follows the low point, is where the protagonist puts all the pieces together to solve the major problem of the story, after which the story ends with the resolution. Even when using this plot structure, it can be difficult to keep the story going. This is where the writing strategy yes but or no and can be helpful. To sum it up, this basically means that the story should constantly be shifting between wins and losses for the protagonist. Yes but applies to when something positive happens but leads to another issue. For example, it could be the protagonist finding the ancient scroll they were looking for, but now they have to fight the evil wizard that guards it. No and applies to negative situations, where something bad causes another problem that needs to be solved. In the same example, this could be the protagonist losing the battle against the evil wizard, and now their friend has been turned into a hamster. Keeping these strategies in mind when writing can help make sure there is a follow-up to a plot point already in development while the plot point is being written. When using this strategy, new conflicts in the story will result, and when introducing multiple smaller conflicts to a story, they should be resolved in the reverse order of which they were introduced. The main overarching conflict should be introduced first and resolved last. For example, if there are 3 conflicts in a plot, the first conflict introduced should be solved last, the second should be solved second, and the third should be solved first. This helps to avoid constantly jumping between too many different plot lines, which may lead to reader confusion. When the story is planned out entirely, then it's time to move on to scripting. There are many different strategies for scripting a graphic novel, and they vary depending on the purpose of the script and the artist or writer's personal preferences. Some scripts are created by writers for illustrators, in which case they may be a lot more detailed to help the artist properly understand the writer's ideas. The 3 most common forms of scripting I have found are screenplay style, description or outlines, and thumbnailing. The screenplay style of scripting is very self-explanatory, as the script is literally just written like a screenplay. The description or outlining strategy varies a lot between specific artists and writers, and they are often almost written like a summary of the story. Thumbnailing, which is my personal favorite strategy, utilizes a combination of very quick, messy sketches and written description to visually convey the progression of a story. If thumbnailing is not used in the original scripting process, it is often still utilized in a later phase of creating the graphic novel. While scripting may be unpleasant, especially for artists, a finalized, detailed script assists in keeping a creative flow and working out issues early in the process. In fact, thorough planning as a whole may seem like a waste of extra time and effort, however, it actually saves a lot of time in the long term. Having detailed references and knowing exactly what needs to be done and how it is going to be done prevents creative block and makes all information easily accessible. Trust me, nobody wants to go through every page they've previously made to try to figure out what a side character's eyes colors are. Even though the planning phase can seem stretched out and boring, it is completely necessary. You cannot build a house with no foundation, and comic art is exactly the same. Another aspect of graphic novels that require a lot of planning are the characters. Each character has a role in the story, whether they are a main character or a side character. The protagonist of the story is usually a main character, but not every main character is a protagonist. The protagonist is a character with good goals and morals that the audience can cheer for, and oppositely, the antagonist is a character whose goals negatively affect the protagonist or other aspects of the story. To create realistic, believable characters, they should have a balance of strengths and flaws. While it can be easy for many artists to fall into the trap of adding every cool idea they have to each character, it can make the characters feel very one-dimensional. In both writing and visual design, it is helpful to think realistically about character designs. Real people will have many likes and dislikes, hobbies, habits, and environments, and this will often affect the way they look and behave. For example, the average temperature of the place a character lives may affect the type of clothing they wear. Completely realistic design may not always be necessary or applicable for some genres of graphic novels, especially in fantasy or science fiction, but thinking intentionally about these aspects of characters will give them more depth. It is also very important when writing or designing any character, but especially those who are part of marginalized communities, to do research to avoid spreading false information or negative stereotypes. When making the visual designs of characters for graphic novels, keep them simple. It's important to remember that this character will be drawn tens, hundreds, or even thousands of times. If their design has the same amount of detail as a Renaissance painting, not will this only add a lot of extra time to the comic process, but it also creates a lot more room for inconsistency and error. A design with too many colors and design elements can also look very busy and unbalanced. After all planning is done, the final artwork can begin. Not every page in a comic or graphic novel looks the same. In fact, most comic artists recommend that no 2 pages in one book should look too similar. So how do they vary the look of pages? Usually the difference come from changes in the shape and arrangement of panels and gutters. Panels, which are also referred to as frames, are each individual illustration on a comic page, with each representing one moment or action in the sequence that is the page. The gutters are the spaces between these panels. I personally like to think of each panel as its own shot in a TV show or movie. I imagine there's a little camera moving around the scene that captures each moment. If there was a movie where every scene is just many close-up shots of people's faces from the same distance and angle, it would end up being a very boring movie. In the same way, a comic page where each panel looks the same would be a very monotonous reading experience. A good rule to follow is to switch either the angle, distance, or placement of the imaginary camera every time a different character speaks or characters are moving to a different area of their current space or setting. If the characters or the invisible camera itself is moved to a different location entirely, artists will often add an establishing shot or a panel that shows a large part of the setting. This will help ground the scene in its location and avoid reader confusion. The content of a panel isn't the only thing that can add interest, though. The shape and size of each panel should vary too. Panel size is actually extremely influential in how a reader interprets a scene. A larger panel will put more emphasis on its contents than a smaller one. It is important to have a variety of panel sizes on each page, otherwise nothing will stand out. While panel shape is less important to the emphasis of the contents of a scene, it significantly affects the feeling of a page. Panels in the shape of a rectangle with a longer vertical length can feel claustrophobic. Panels with a wider rectangle can feel more open. Triangular panels add dynamic movement to a page. If every panel is the same size square, the story itself begins to feel very static. When varying the shape and size of panels, the panel's border width and the width of the gutters should stay consistent. In most digital art programs with comic tools, this will likely be default settings, but when using traditional art mediums, this can be ensured by planning the measurements of gutters beforehand and using the same tool, most likely a pen, to outline every panel. When structuring a page, it is important to keep in mind the reading flow of the panels. In a graphic novel produced in English, the story should progress through panels from left to right, not vertically. When panels are arranged freely on a page, rather than being anchored with gutters though, this may not exactly apply. The best way to test the flow of a comic page is to ask others for feedback. If someone other than the artist cannot understand the page, the panel arrangement needs to change. The content of each comic panel is much more important than the panels themselves. While every artist's process and art style is different, there are a few art techniques that can assist in making a graphic novel look its best. In styles that include line art, line weight is very important. Line weight is the thickness or thinness of a line. Artwork with no line weight variation can feel very flat, especially in comic art. When lining artwork, elements in the foreground of a piece should have thicker lines, while elements that are farther away from the imaginary camera should have thinner lines. This adds a lot of depth to a piece even without color or shading. When adding color and shading, many artists will choose a specific color palette. This can add a sense of cohesiveness to the entire graphic novel and will save time that would have been used to choose colors later in the coloring process. Working with a small color palette, though, can sometimes be a bit restrictive. Colors can work to add emphasis in certain elements of a page, and this is through variations in the value, hue, and saturation of colors that create contrast with other colors. The value of a color is its lightness or darkness. The hue of a color is the color itself, like blue or red. The saturation is the intensity of a color or how much gray is added or not added to it. Changing any of these elements will affect color a lot and can be used to make cohesive color palettes. When the artwork of a graphic novel is finalized, lettering can be added, and the lettering of a graphic novel can make or break the reading experience. The term lettering refers to the process of adding text to a page. This involves font, text size, text color, and the text relation to the space on the page or in speech bubbles. The main focus of an artist when working with lettering should be readability. The font choice and the text color and size usually contribute the most to this. Font choices should be consistent throughout the novel and should be clean and readable. Whether the artist is choosing a pre-made font or hand lettering their pages, script fonts such as cursive or anything that is very thin or decorative should be avoided. These types of fonts can work for certain intentional creative choices, for example, a cursive font used to convey the feeling of a handwritten letter. But with a more decorative font, extra care has to be taken to make sure the text is large enough to be read. WebAIM, or Web Accessibility in mind, defines a large text size as 18 point or larger. While consistent text size may be difficult to decide on due to having to fit varying amounts of text into many different sizes of speech bubbles, the most helpful tip I have found is to make sure to include speech bubbles in beginning sketches. This ensures that there will be space for both the text within the bubble and the speech bubble itself on the page, and that no major changes will be necessary in the later stages of the process. While text should typically be centered in the speech bubble, not every speech bubble needs to be a perfectly symmetrical circle with a tiny speck as its tail. Variation in the shape of a speech or thought bubble can convey different tones and emotions. In fact, if every speech bubble looks the same, it begins to feel very repetitive and less engaging to readers. A speech bubble where a character is shouting should look very different from a character who is whispering. This will help make speech feel natural, as changes in tone and volume are common in real conversations. Another element of speech bubble design that can work with shape is the color of speech bubbles in text. In most comics or graphic novels, especially those produced in grayscale, the text bubble will be solid white and the words will be solid black. This is about the most readable text will ever be, but it is very standard and doesn't offer a lot of opportunities for creative variation. While there are endless uses and possibilities for different text and speech bubble colors, the most basic rule that needs to be followed is to not put light text on light backgrounds and not put dark text on dark backgrounds. This is important not just in comics and graphic novels, but in graphic design as a whole, because in order for text to be easily understandable, there needs to be a high amount of contrast between the text color and background color. The value of a text will always affect its readability more than its hue. For example, as you can see, the text on the left side of this slide is barely readable, and it may even begin to hurt your eyes if looked at for a prolonged period of time. The web-aimed text contrast checker gave it a contrast ratio of 1.34 to 1, which is significantly under its recommendation of a minimum ratio of 4.5 to 1 for normal text and 3 to 1 for large text. Now on the right side, the only element of the text and background that I changed were the values, and it instantly boosted its contrast ratio from 1.34 to 1 to 8.36 to 1. The best advice I can give, which applies to every part of the graphic novel creation process, is to ask peers for feedback. An artist who spends large amounts of time and effort on a piece of art may unintentionally overlook some of its flaws, and speaking to others is the easiest way to learn about these issues and find ways to solve them. So now that you've learned a bit about creating graphic novels, it's time to actually apply that. I'm gonna have you watch a clip of a movie and then give you some guidelines to create your own little comic page. Some of you may have already seen the Minecraft movie, and you may be very familiar with this scene.
Chicken jockey.
No. Yeah, it totally does, but, please no. So you can choose how much of it you want to add. The only requirements are that it should be 5 to 8 panels, must include at least one speech bubble, must include the words chicken jockey, and must be school appropriate. And you should have one big piece of paper at your bench, and you can work with the other people at your bench in a group. And I'll give you 10 minutes to complete your comic page, and then I want you to share it with the bench next to you. You can grab markers.
Don't worry about it. I know we have to worry about chicken jack.
Or do you want to join in?
Okay, what do we? What's one? How do we want to do this thing? Actually, that's probably better. I was thinking like 1, 2, and then kind of like a bigger one, and then 3, 4, and then maybe like smaller one, 5, 6, yeah. Garrett, that's it.
Like if we had chicken jockey. Yeah.
Are you okay? Who the heck's drawing dessert? Who's drawing Garrett? 1, 2, 3, not it. Say you're drawing Garrett. No, it says like that. Draw Garrett. Remember, try to keep it simplistic, but not too simplistic.
Oh, good. Nice way to start. We got some good panels.
What?
What's the dude in the pink jacket? I don't even think I did it right. Hey, I got my spot back.
Dynamic want it to make it geometric.
Look at the script. No, go back to the garret. 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 Garret has a beard. You guys know what the beard is.
Yeah, what are we trying to give it a face? Yeah, it's gonna be like I'm gonna drop
It's gonna be
He's gonna get absolutely mutilated with this.
What the heck? The flip. How is kissing appropriate? How is kissing not appropriate? Are you making fun of me?
like Pokemon.
There's a lot of paneling. A lot of paneling.
Fire. Absolute cinema.
I don't always know our
Singular warning
Thank you. Yes. Oh, yeah, that five family. You're gonna have five. You made two.
I wanted to be big.
You're not done. What's the one that?
Okay, so the 10-minute timer did go off, but I'm guessing not many of you are done, so I am going to give you 10 more minutes.
We need to make
Fine, 5 I guess, as a treat. I don't expect you guys to be Michelangelo.
but we are back to
They aren't meant to be super finished.
Garrett is all shocking. I cannot.
Not while I'm trying
I don't know what it's here.
to. It's gonna have like these interesting arms.
High res. So chicken. I guess I correct that.
That's literally that's our double idiot.
Chris said he was gonna get absolutely
Wait, is it Bibbly reading or is it? No, is it? What the frick? It looks like a bee. I don't want to draw. Civil rights. Civil rights.
This is art. We're making art right now. We just gotta make one more panel. We gotta make one more panel. And then we'll come together.
Okay, then zombie pig in a box being all mad.
Thank you.
Don't forget, you can add color if you want it.
So there was a neighborhood of ours that had a crush on his sister.
We now know that's yes.
And
That meaning of the chicken.
We all know what's going
time back here. All right, that's so funny. And then it's
on. Draw this man.
I feel like we constantly like shoot them or like our heads bouncing and everything.
I've done like that so far.
Like your generation.
We're so good. We're so good. Our brain is so bomb.
I have this so we can like draw the page. I know. Generation's
Don't worry about it. Don't worry. It's a movie thing. It's a Minecraft movie thing. Minecraft movie thing. I swear. I was. It's how Jennifer Coolidge sounds when she does villages. Okay. I don't know why you said that to me, but. I love that he gets punished just for this. If we had more time, I think it would
So
have been
time
fun
is
to just
up,
have
and it's
another one of
okay if
this.
you aren't done.
And then
So
just the
what
next one just-
I want you to do is to take your drawings to the bench on the other side of you, and I want you, like each group, to give each other 2 things you like about it, and 1 thing, like kindly constructive criticism you think they could improve.
So what group should get together?
So like this group, that group, that group.
So if you're on this side, go over and bring your paper to the left side.
Hey guys.
You didn't even get 5.
No, No, we got 4. This is the best.
You always wear Minecraft. I mean, I just like assume, but I don't want to like. I didn't know if it was a fun trip time and you like the color. I mean,
No, I wear a lot of my best. I like my craft.
I'd like to present to you our chicken jockey experience. So the crate comes down. Conquest chicken jockey here. Conquest chicken jockey. That is Conquest chicken jockey. Then we have the chicken jockey with Garrett the garbage man saying, "Want to fight the chicken?" And then Dominican Steve is the chicken jockey. And he's surprised, and then they get eaten by the chicken jockey.
Oh, okay. I think there was some creative liberties taken.
We had Nakamoff script.
yes, you did. Okay, high five. Don't leave me hanging.
All right. Perfect.
Nice. Okay, and then this is ours. This is our masterpiece. You got the box dropping down.
Chicken jockey.
It opens up, dropping the chicken jockey. You get the chicken.
I'll hold it.
Explosion because the theater.
Theo.
That's the
We make out. I'd like to introduce you to Shut! We have Conquest chicken jockey arriving on the chicken with Dominican Steve.
There we go. It's absolute simple. Absolute. Eat comic book or comic panel. Absolutely beautiful. It's like looking at an animatic. It's like looking at an animatic. It's like nice. It's nice, and then the artist just loses faith in it, and you got the white sketch lines and all that. I'm not gonna lie, it looks a little bit like a Muppet. Hello. Muppet Chicken Jackie.
Cooper, make them kiss.
Good job, Cooper. We're proud of you.
He knows the truth of Minecraft.
Anyways, I'm gonna sit back.
We have Zombie going on the chicken jockey, D-Man the chicken jockey, and we have Dominican Steve.
And guys, I drew the hair and the beard, not the dragon.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, dear. That's good. I fixed. You next one.
What is that?
I think a piece of
This was amazing.
They would buy it. They'd be like, love it. Underneath,
So if everyone's done sharing, you can return to your seats. And now that you've had a little bit of an experience with making a comic, I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience. So when I first started my research for this process, I was using Microsoft OneNote to take notes, since it had been recommended by many past seniors. I found that when typing notes, I became more worried about the amount and organization of the information than actually learning it. So I switched to handwritten notes. I tried note cards and a physical notebook, but it was still too focused on the quantity of research rather than the quality. This is why I eventually started taking my notes in a sketchbook. With a sketchbook, I felt like the notes didn't have to be as organized, and I was able to take notes in a more visual fashion, which feels very fitting for an art-centered project. At the beginning of my project, I did a wide variety of research on the entire graphic novel creation process, but as my project continued, I plan to do more in-depth research about each step of the process while completing that step. So instead of my project having a research phase, a planning phase, and a production phase, I had many tiny phases of each for every task I had to complete. This helped me to have continuous motivation throughout this project, as to be honest, the research phase is my least favorite part of the project process, and I begin to feel stuck if I focus on research for too long without applying anything I've learned. Speaking of applying research, my original product plan was to write, illustrate, and print an entire graphic novel. I also originally only gave myself 3 months to finish it. This was obviously a problem. I failed to realize that each panel of the 40 to 60 page graphic novel I planned to make was its own individual completed illustration, and art takes a lot of time. With my original goals, my planning phase would have been condensed to 2 weeks, which would have been a huge mistake. As previously mentioned, planning is the foundation to making a successful graphic novel. For my final products, I ended up completing the majority of the elements I would need for the planning phase of a graphic novel, including an outline, a small amount of thumbnailing, character and environment references, and concept art. While this project didn't go exactly as I had planned, I definitely do appreciate how it has contributed to my growth as a student and as an artist. I will continue my artistic journey in the fall of 2025 by attending the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, where I will major in illustration. I would like to give a quick thank you to my friends and family and the Valley New School advisors, especially Ms. Kay, for their support and encouragement throughout the emotional roller coaster that was this project. I would also like to thank the live sources that I spoke to, and lastly, my 3 cats, who really tried their best all year to make sure I didn't get any work done. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Phoebe? That's more of a hot seat question, but sure. Phoebe asked me to describe in detail my last stand in the toddler apocalypse. And I think I would be dragged screaming into a crowd of toddlers, and as my last stand, I would scream out to the heavens, tell my cats I love them, and then I would be brutally mauled to death. Robin?
Why did you choose the chicken jockey scene for art drawing?
I felt like it included a good amount of action. Oh, sorry. Robin asked why I chose the chicken jockey scene. I felt like it included a good amount of action, as well as just like quite a bit of words that were pretty easy to remember. And also I felt like it was something that a lot of people would find like funny and would be easier to get people to like collaborate on. Evelina?
Who are your live sources?
Evelyn asked who my live sources were, so I got some advice from Matthew Ehrman, who is the author of a graphic novel called Loving Ohio that I read and really liked, and I also spoke to a friend that I made at the pre-college program that I went to, McKean Teska, who does like webcomics, and his advice was pretty helpful too. Ash? Ash asked advice for future seniors, and I would say just like keep your goals realistic, like know what you can do and challenge yourself and like push yourself a little bit, but also like don't plan to do an entire graphic novel in 3 months. Veronica?
What was the storyline of your graphic novel?
Veronica asked what the storyline of my graphic novel was. And it follows the story of 3 students at like a fancy fine art school, who are trying to solve the theft of a fashion student's like final installation. So it's kind of still like very much in the concepting phase, but I do plan to continue it. Tegan?
What are your career plans after college?
Tegan asked what my career plans after college are. And I plan to go into either concept art or editorial illustration, which is something I really didn't think I would like, but like I ended up enjoying it a lot when I had to do it for the pre-college program. So. Cameron?
If you were to decide, what is like your, I guess, most favorite art style that you like to draw, and then like your least favorite, like one that you just like hate to draw, or like create?
Like to draw in myself?
Yeah. Or just, like, see other
So
people.
Cameron asked what my favorite art style to draw in is, and my least favorite is. I really enjoy like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a combination. I find a lot of inspiration from like cartoons and a little bit from like manga, but mostly just from other artists. It's like semi-realistic, but in a more cartoon-leaning way. And
Yeah.
the style I like the least would probably be realism, because I'm not good at that. Ms. Lutke?
Graphic novels are produced professionally. Is it usually a team of people? And do they use like, do they replicate drawings throughout the book, or do they do every single line?
Sorry, could you explain a bit more? The second part?
Do they ever repeat drawings and like use like a sort of like a template and put it all throughout the book, or do they make every single drawing?
Okay. So Ms. Lutke asked if graphic novels being created professionally are usually a team of people, and if they use repeats of drawings. It really depends on the, like, whether it's someone self-publishing or like through a company. Usually comic books will have like large teams of people, especially for like superhero comics. And usually they, because of like such short deadlines, will take some shortcuts and repeat panels. A lot of them have like very thorough reference materials, so like character turnarounds and just like stuff they can very easily use to like quickly replicate drawings. Usually I would say for like graphic novels that are more like self-published or like individual artists making them, usually it's either just a one person acting as both a writer and an artist, or there might be a writer, an artist, and maybe an editor. Milo?
What is your biggest takeaway and or proudest moment?
Milo asked what my biggest takeaway and proudest moment are of this year. My biggest takeaway is to not always assume the worst. I kind of fall into the mindset that everything's going to go wrong, but it kind of usually never does. And my proudest moment is probably like right now. I like throughout the entire year thought I just wouldn't get here, so I'm happy to be here. Veronica?
If you had to pick a different topic for your senior project, what would you pick?
Veronica asked if I had to pick a different topic for my senior project, what I would pick. And I would probably have picked, I know a lot of seniors do this, but like a mural project. I think it would be really cool to paint over the beige here. Ms. Fornes?
What were some inspirational, either like comic books from your youth or graphic novels as you mature that like influenced your art style now?
Ms. Fornes asked what some graphic novels, either now or when I was growing up, influenced my art style. And from when I was growing up, I would like I said at the beginning of my presentation, I would constantly go into the library at my middle school, and they had like the entirety of the like Maximum Ride manga series that I would just read over and over again, and I would say that was influential to my art at the time. And now there are a lot of like, I find a lot of inspiration from less graphic novels and more like individually created artwork. But I would say that Loving Ohio, the graphic novel that was created by one of my life sources, was really inspirational to me with like the color palette and the flow of everything. It was really cool. Satya?
What artists do you most like look up to, and which ones inspired you?
Satya asked what artists I most look up to and what ones inspire me the most. I would have to say ABD Illustrates. He makes a lot of like D&D and like fan art, and it's like really cool. Oh, this is a difficult question. I can't really think of anyone else off at the top of my head, sorry. Alex?
What's one thing you like to
Alex asked what's one thing I like to implement into my character designs, and I would say a lot of my characters have like an alternative fashion sense. I find a lot of inspiration from like that, like a lot of different alternative subcultures of fashion, and I think they're pretty cool. Aiden?
What type of character do you think you to write for?
Aiden asked what type of character is easiest for me to write for, and I would say a lot of the characters that I write are like very creative people that are like hesitant to act in situations. I find myself falling on like that specific personality type a lot while writing. I think it's just like I'm very indecisive, so I can kind of like very much relate to a character's like main flaw being their indecisiveness. Miss Fornes?
Can you go back to the slide that has some of your characters and describe some of their, like who they are and tell the story a little bit?
So this character is the fashion student that I was talking about, who the like installation was stolen from. And the other character is kind of like a former best friend of that character who is trying to like solve the case kind of to like win the friendship of the other person back, which is kind of like a toxic dynamic, and that's explored in it. But basically it turns out that the dress was never stolen, and she just like basically hid it to cover up the fact that she was copying other people's work. So yeah.
So what brought you to writing about fashion?
My mother asked what brought me to writing about a fashion designer, and honestly, I just wanted to draw a lot of cool clothes. Ms. Lukey?
What has improved the most in your drawing last year?
Ms. Lukey asked what has improved the most in my drawing in the past year. And I would probably just say like that I actually finished them. I kind of get stuck in the trap of, oh, I don't like this one, I'm just gonna abandon it and start over again. And I kind of realized that everything can be fixed eventually. But for like a visual thing, I would probably say like my color choices. I think I fell a lot into like not wanting to experiment with like more saturated colors, and I kind of kept it pretty grayscale because I didn't want to overwhelm anything. And I heard the entire time when I was like learning as an artist that like saturated colors you shouldn't use, especially not together, but I have found a lot of ways to make them work. Tegan?
Are you good at drawing hands?
Tegan asked if I'm good at drawing hands. No, I actually used 3D models to draw those ones. I despise drawing hands. Milo?
What is your favorite thing to draw?
Milo asked what my favorite thing to draw is, and probably hair. I really like the way it flows and the different styles and textures it can be. Annabelle?
Have you ever made a character that would like fit better in a fantasy world?
Annabeth asked if I've ever made a character that would fit better in a fantasy world. And yes, I have. I used to make a lot of, fun fact, I have never played Dungeons and Dragons, but I used to make a lot of characters for it. So they all fit into a pretty fantasy setting, so.
Thank you.